Our final guest is Chuck Hagel, former Secretary of Defense and former Republican Senator from Nebraska. During his tenure, he directed significant steps to modernize America's partnerships and alliances, advance the rebalance in Asia-Pacific, bolster support for European allies, and enhance defense cooperation in the Middle East. Welcome.
How are you?
Hi.
Mr. Secretary, thanks for joining us. I don't know what to call you, Senator, Mr. Secretary, Professor, Businessman. You've got a lot of titles, but...
Well, Chuck works.
Okay, Chuck. Well, you made some news yesterday. You were among 100-plus national security officials to endorse Harris for president. Can you tell us how that effort came about and why you got on board?
Well, we could be at this for hours, but I have always believed in, and I hope I've practiced this in all the privileges I've had to serve this country in different ways. Character is the most important requisite of leadership. Character includes honesty, decency, relevancy, but that's where you start. I've always believed character is more important than policy, because if you don't have character at the top of an institution, it's going to end up badly, regardless of policy. That's where I started. I think Vice President Harris does have that quality. I've always believed the three indispensable requisites of leadership are character, courage, and judgment. Indispensable requisites for life, quite frankly, but certainly for leadership. And in a nutshell, that's why I endorsed her and not Trump, because I don't think he possesses character.
Okay, well, when you were, you've been on the inside, obviously, a leader at the Pentagon, and a while back you launched the Defense Innovation Initiative. Now, outside, back in the private sector, looking back, how is the Pentagon doing compared to that initiative and its goals?
Well, I'm not up to date, excuse me, with all of it, but I think they've done okay. And I say that because the Pentagon, like any institution in government, is restricted by, first of all, budget. Since 2011, we've been living with continuing resolutions. For an institution like the Pentagon, or any institution, you can't plan. And because the Pentagon is the largest institution in the world, the most complicated, you have to have that ability to plan 5 years out, 3 years, and so on. The congressman was talking about innovation. It's hard to innovate without that. Also, over the years, I think the flexibility of the Pentagon's management has really been limited by, for example, I remember when I was there, I suspect it's still the same as I talked to the secretaries, the ability to shut down bases. We haven't had base closures for years and years and years. When I was there, we thought about 24% of the capacity we had, we didn't need. They were duplicate, they were old, and we need to shut down some bases. Another is old platforms. Example, A-10 Warthog. Great plane in its day, but has lost capacity. Every time we would try to shut it off or phase it out, no, you can't do that. Well, my point in using those examples is a lot of flexibility has been taken away from the Pentagon's management. Now, I've been on both sides of that table. The Congress has a very important responsibility and oversight. But when you've got, and by the way, the first month I was there in February of 2013, sequestration hit. And we continue to cut $50 billion a year from our budget. Well, when you take away those resources, and I don't think the Pentagon budget's heavy enough now to address some of these things, you got a problem. But going back to, I think, the original point, and the congressman hit this, is innovation. And that's why I announced the Defense Innovation Initiative when I did in 2014. We've got to start looking at things differently, and that means you've got to bring in the private sector more completely and outside of the Pentagon thinking. I mean, look at what's just happened in Lebanon in the last couple of days.
Yep.
Now, that's not good news, but it's reality. And we've got to stay ahead of that as much as we can. I don't think any country or any institution, the Pentagon included, as great as it is, and I think our military is the best in the world for many reasons, mainly because of our people, because you're only as strong as the weakest link. But that innovation and freshness and newness to bring in all resources is really critical, and it's particularly critical now going forward.
What, with limited resources for every agency, including the Department of Defense, there's always got to be prioritization. There has been some disputes, arguments of whether U.S. policymakers should be focusing more on China or Russia, and obviously we've got to focus on both, but where should we be prioritizing?
Well, you've got to prioritize everything. I mean, for the Pentagon, I mean, that's their assignment, that's their responsibility. Well, I'll give you an example. In 2014, I spent about 5 days in China. I met with Xi 3 different times, and one of the main reasons I went to China was because of what the Chinese were doing in the South China Sea, East China Sea. Congressman was talking a little bit about that. But I wanted to see myself, get my own sense, and I've been to China a number of times before I was Secretary of Defense. First time I went was 1983. But I wanted to also see their NCO school. The Russians don't have really any kind of competent NCO corps. You can't have a first-rate military without a first-rate NCO corps. What the Chinese had done, and this is just an example, they had copied our NCO training approach academy, and I went to see it, spent a day there. Pretty sophisticated. I don't think it's as good as ours. Now, that was 2014. So, but the point being, what I saw in China was, and you don't see it all, but a military that was getting better and more sophisticated, more competent, but they were not as good as ours, which leads us to another piece of this conversation. Like I said, we could be at this for days.
Right.
People. I mean, we all know people are everything, and you've got to have the best leaders, especially at the NCO Corps. And yes, the officer corps is important, generals and admirals are important, but boy, that NCO Corps is critical. So we've got an issue, a problem, a challenge because of our recruitment. And it was an issue that I talked about when I was secretary, because that recruitment leads to retention issues after 20 years of 2 wars. That was a big part of the problem because the same people kept going back, redeployed, redeployed, redeployed. And that caused a lot of problems, especially when they got out. But I think my point being is when you view this, you've got to use the accumulation of all these pieces to understand the strength of a military. I don't think the Chinese have what we have. Now, they are sophisticated. They're the best military next, I think, to ours.
Right.
They've got the numbers, the strength, innovation, but they don't have the freedom of the individuals and the people and the thinking. And that's another component of people in our system is freedom. And that doesn't mean you take them lightly. We can't because of what they're doing, the Belt and Road systems and so on and so on and so on. But we've got to be smart and we've got to be serious. And I think it goes back again to giving our leadership at the Pentagon more flexibility. That leads to more innovation and more opportunity to keep us ahead of China and everyone else, because it's not going to get any simpler or any less dangerous. And I think we're seeing that today in Ukraine, the Middle East, and how those things are resolved, when they are resolved, the time it takes to get to the next step really depends on us. And then, and I'm sorry to ramble along here, but I think all these pieces are important. The other thing I would say, critical, and this is another reason I endorsed Harris, alliances. Alliances have always been critical. The United States could never have projected power in the world like we have since World War II, and like we are still doing, without alliances and partners. Yes, it helps them that we're there in NATO, but NATO is critically important for the future of this country and the world, and those alliances are critically important to the future of freedom in this country.
Well, speaking of the Vice President, what, in this space in particular, what advice would you have for her if she does become the Commander-in-Chief?
Well, that again, we could take days, but discussing that.
30 seconds, you know, rather.
Yeah. Well, you know, a former senator, when you say 30 seconds, that's almost impossible.
Right.
Well, I'll try to do it in 30 seconds.
Right. No, I'll give you one.
I think what she's got to do is what she knows she has to do. I mean, she's been vice president almost 4 years. She was in the Senate before that.
Right.
She's got a good experience base. No one comes into that job, obviously, with all the answers and all the abilities. I mean, it's a tough job. Everybody's got some weaknesses. Learn from other people, but bring good people around you. As a president, that is so key. It's key for any leader. Good people, surround yourself with good people. I think, go back to my 3 requisites for leadership. Be direct, be clear, be honest with the American people and our allies and our adversaries. And don't be afraid of innovation. Try things new. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. I used to say to President Obama, you know, Mr. President, we're going to make mistakes, but you just don't want to make the big ones. And I think she's got those qualities, and she's got a Nebraska boy helping her in Waltz. So I think that team will be a good team, but I think she's ready for this. A president grows every day. A president learns something every day. Joe Biden is a very good friend of mine. I mean, we've known each other, worked with each other over 25 years. And I think he was important for this country and the world the last 4 years to bring some stability to our leadership in the world, to our friends and our allies, to our country. I mean, no country is perfect. No president's policies are perfect. But if you look at what's happened in this country over the last 3-4 years, we're moving in a right direction. And I think Harris, with some new ideas and new thinking, a new generation of leadership, if she builds on that and can get better on some things we haven't done well in the last 4 years, it's what she needs to do.
Last question, I've saved the best for last. Any interest in joining her team if she asks you to?
No, I mean, I'll help her. I'll help her in any way.
Been there, done that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a great run and great privileges and great opportunities to serve this country in so many different ways, and in the private sector and so on. And she needs new, fresh leadership with new ideas. And I'll help her in any way. She knows that, and Waltz knows that. And I can be, I think, more helpful if I don't have a job
From the outside.
from the
Yeah,
outside.
yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, we've run out of time. I'm sorry I can't call you Chuck. So please thank the secretary for joining us.
Thank
and
you.
I'll hand it back to Jeff.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks
Bob,
so much.
thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd like to thank Secretary Hagel and all of our great speakers today. This concludes our program. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Lockheed Martin. On behalf of Lockheed Martin and ourselves, thank you all for coming. If you missed any portion of the show, the event, I should say, everything will be online at thehill.com. Thank you again.